Hello and welcome everybody. I am coming from the barber, so I am basically a new man, and there is a new patch out, so the game is basically a new game. This one is dev diary number 63. I'm on proper variant. We are going to talk about 1.4, both about the patch notes that are in this dev diary, but also about some, something that I've noticed while playing the game, because you can see the patch and the diary came out roughly at 8 AM in the morning, so in the morning indeed, and I am not doing a video until now. What happened? Well, first of all, obviously I was at the barber, but second of all, I tested a couple of things in game, and I want to address that once we get to them. I marked anything that we already knew in red and anything that is truly new that wasn't announced yet in green. So let's start. Everything went well since the last dev diary, so the patch will drop today as promised. It packs a mix of new features, new events, balance improvements, AI improvements, modding improvements, and fixes to bugs reported by a great community. The free features, of course, the rule presets, we knew about that. Character finder presets, we knew about that as well. Men-at-Arms can be raised independently of levies. There is a new button for itself, essentially, and you can click that. We're going to take a look at that in the game in a second. At game start, rulers now start with a decent amount of men-at-arms already hired based on their income. Dynamic garrisons for holdings have been introduced, so when you siege something down, there will be less or fewer troops available in that afterwards, and of course it will replenish as time passes. Unlock the Monarch's Journeys cosmetic items, added new lifestyle events, added the Meet Peers activity for children. That is quite nice. Your child can also get invited even if you are not your child yourself. That is quite nice. And some traits have access to new interactions and decisions. We also talked about all of these, basically all of these, or most of these, I think. Actually, we only talked about some of these, but most of these are just logical. For example, Wrathful can duel criminals to enforce the punishment. That is very cool. Duels so far were quite limited. Most of the time you would see duels because somebody, for example, was Norse and just was angry, etc, etc. But other than that, most people can't do it. If you're Wrathful, you can do it, honestly, making Wrathful one of my favorite claims or traits, because it makes it so that you can duel people without being Norse. Irritable can duel who they want if they are at the stress level 1 or above. How cool is that? It will generate dread and tyranny. Can't read today. Anyway, yeah, all of these are cool, giving more interactions just in general here. You can see that right here, Diligent can gain some stress and also some development in your capital, etc, etc. This is very cool. The more the traits interact with other systems, the more does this character-based game, character-focused game come together. That's essentially what I want, so I'm very happy about that. Balance. The Norman culture now has access to regional innovations from the Norse culture from the start of the game. Thank you. Otherwise, that would be, now it's actually fun to play essentially somebody that conquers Normandy and then becomes Norman, and you can keep raiding. You can do things, you can continue to do things, that otherwise you would have been locked out of. Some traits were updated. We also saw that Ambitious, for example, they can now gain stress when signing a white peace, or rather, we knew that this would happen. What exactly would happen is, of course, new, but this in itself is not new. Gregarious, they gain stress if they fail at swaying someone. These are all very, very cool, but I'll be honest with you, you will see them in the game. I don't think we need to go through them one-to-one. Yet again, I simply want to say the more character traits feature into every other feature, the happier I am. Overall, faction dynamic has been updated. The power threshold is more dynamic. It will be decreased by other factions and their state. There was a dev diary about this in particular, essentially talking about the fact that factions will make it so that if you already have a faction rebelling against you, other factions will have a lower threshold for rebelling as well. So that makes a lot of sense and should make it a bit harder at the very least, to deal with the factions. There will be no factions created by AI vassals in the first years of the game to give enough time to stabilize existing realms. 1 year for dukes, 5 years for kings, and 10 years for emperors. I think this is in particular useful for the AI, not so much for the player. Obviously, the player gets a bit of a break as well and can focus on other things and can focus on getting the realm in order. But I think this is mostly important for things like the Holy Roman Empire. Heinrich IV in 1066 needs to get things under control, and for that, of course, he needs some time. And yeah, I think this is quite a good change. Faith modifiers are more impactful for zealous character and weaker for cynical. I'm very interested in that one. Intimidated characters will not be afraid of joining a faction above its power threshold. So if there is already a faction of enough people that say, hey, enough is enough, we need to stand up against this guy, then intimidated characters have a chance to also do that. So there is a bit of a snowball effect. I'm a big fan of that. Characters with an opinion of 80 plus will never join a faction. We already knew that. Independence faction modifiers have been updated. Characters will join a suitable populist faction if they exist, instead of creating a new independence faction. Now, I like this change in theory. And again, please do ignore this event. We're going to take a look at that in a second. But in this playthrough, you can see I have played 40 years in just like 40 minutes. I essentially just sped through, maybe 30 minutes even, I can't remember. And what I noticed is that if there is a populist rebellion that some of my vassals were a part of, if I defeat the populist army, meaning I had a rebellion, for example, and it no longer belongs to me because I just died and Aquitaine is there, blah, blah, blah. But I had a rebellion down here, and some of my vassals over here said, hey, I want to be a part of that. I defeated the army down there, and the war was over. And I think that isn't right. I think something isn't working right there, because of course that is how it functions if you just have a rebellion. You know, at that point, the game just says, okay, we're gonna make it so that once you defeat the army, the war's over. But I don't think that is how it should work there. I like the change in theory, because this means that no longer will the populace, will the peasants be defeated without much resistance. There will now be noblemen and noble women behind them, so that is quite cool. I just, from what I noticed, it's a bit weird. Electors are less likely to join or create a faction. That is very cool as well, making it so basically that, you know, anything that has to do with elective monarchy just got buffed. I'm a big fan personally. Counts are less likely to join or create a faction, and kings are more likely to join or create a faction. Good changes, decent changes. Characters can be more motivated to join if one of their neighbors is in the faction, making it so that factions basically become regional powerhouses, which I think is really, really cool, because of course that is how it worked. You know, the Duke of Bavaria, for example, I mean, it did happen, but most of the time they were lobbying on a local, on a regional level. You know, he wouldn't go and say, hey, Duke of Engern, for example, you know, can you please fight this war with me? It would happen. I'm not saying that, of course, they did talk to each other, they did communicate, but most of the time, these sort of factions were formed on a regional basis, so this is definitely very cool. Claimant faction modifiers have been updated. Powerful vassals are more likely to create claimant factions if they have a negative opinion. So essentially, we're seeing something where sometimes people will just say, hey, you know what? I like being in this kingdom, just not under you. So this is definitely a change that I also like to see. Generally, this faction overhaul is very, very nice. I most certainly like it. I think 1.4 brings that to the table. Surprisingly, of course, 1.4 is here. There's no paid deals here, anything to go with it. This just came out. And I like the idea that they said, hey, factions weren't where we needed them to be. Although, of course, if you ask me for my opinion, then I want basically factions and societies merged entirely, making it so that, you know, for example, once Royal Court comes out, I can say, hey, my dear vassal, I know that you're organizing with the other folks down there in a regional interest group, and I would like to show up during, you know, one of your meetings in one of your throne rooms and maybe say hello and maybe, you know, persuade all of you to calm down a bit. Because right now, of course, to calm down a faction, you don't calm down the faction. You calm down every single member individually. So, yeah, I just hope that maybe there can be something there. But again, I do like, if we have the current faction system the way it is, I do like that they go more into the direction there of regional powerhouses anyway. Defeating or dealing with Scandinavian adventurers now gives a temporary reprieve proportional to size, with smaller realms gaining a larger break, whilst larger realms become valid targets again faster. Very cool. I like that a lot. Of course, that is makes it so essentially that there is a bit of a balance to the Scandinavian adventurers coming over. Fire and Blood event now adds loot to your raid army, not directly to your treasury, and fires a little less often. Now, that is very cool, making it so that if you get Fire and Blood, the event, I think it's 25 or 35 bucks, you are in a position where you can then say, hey, I need to bring this army home. Before that, you know, the other side was unable to ever get any of that money, but now since it's added to your raid army, all of a sudden you can get that money if you defeat the army that is the raid army. I like that a lot, and I think it would be even better if we were in a position where if I take prisoners, right, during a raid, if those prisoners were attached, whatever that means, were attached to my army, making it so that I need to bring the army home before I have those prisoners and can then sell them. I think that would also be very cool. Founding the capital of the Rus now gives a mild development level boost, as well as a reasonably hefty boost over time, rather than, I think they just gave 20 points immediately until now. Increase the amount of money everyone starts the campaign with by 50%. That is very cool. I like that. It makes it so that everybody's a bit more flexible at the start. Raiders no longer take attrition when raiding next to major rivers. Thank you. Thank you so damn much. Scandinavian Adventures event minute arms are now inheritable. Also good. I think this is a buff to the Scandinavian Adventurers that we did need. The tribal government now gives a small amount of prestige each month. This helps avoid situations where new rulers have virtually no prestige gain. I think there is a buff, of course, to the tribal area for the AI primarily, but I think in general this is a good idea. Now let's move on to AI. There's a lot of stuff in here. To sum up what the general notion of the AI for this patch is, essentially, the AI should be better at evaluating what a war is all about, why the war is happening, whether the war should be happening, and then how they should do warfare. Let's hope that that does indeed happen. They should be more eager to help somebody, even if it looks like a losing situation, initially at the very least, to the AI. So, for example, if I have an army, and right next to me is the AI, and I decide to walk into a bigger stack, because I assume that both of us together can take them with terrain, with defender advantage, etc., etc., then the AI will be more likely to say, yes, you know what, I don't see it, but if you see it, then I will come and aid you. Told the AI that it shouldn't be avoiding running into stronger enemies when it explicitly is trying to help out one of its own units dealing with stronger enemies. That's basically this. Told the AI that just because its units are in a separate stack, that doesn't mean it shouldn't help out in a combat. It is losing 2 provinces away. Yeah, just these sort of optimizations. Let's see where the AI stands after this patch. Lowered the odds of creating a cadet branch for counts and rulers serving a liege of the same dynasty. I think that is a good idea. There is a lot of cadet branch spam, so cutting down on that a bit is quite decent. Feudal and clan rulers will not declare war on tribal rulers if they have tribal holdings to convert in their realms. This is great. Now, I don't know how this plays out. I haven't done a time-lapse yet. I haven't done several time-lapses yet because I want to see how the AI interacts with this. But in theory, what we're looking at here, of course, we have the Byzantines that get halted to a certain degree, that has been announced. But this is also something that will impact, of course, the Seljuks. The Seljuks absolutely adore blobbing into the steppe, basically, right? We need the Seljuks to go somewhere else, though. We need the Seljuks to go either towards India, which they didn't historically, but which is interesting, or towards the west, so towards the Holy Land, towards Asia Minor, for example. And that is something that I hope that we will see, because they will essentially conquer a tribal holding and then go, boom, got a tribal holding, I'm out of here. I think that is a good idea. I think that is something that hopefully works as designed. Vassals' holy wars will be declared only to direct neighbors to protect smaller realms from the Byzantine Empire bigger realms. This is what we already knew. The Byzantines essentially stop expanding massively because their vassals will no longer say, hey, I'm a vassal in, let's say, North Africa, but I'm going to go and, attack this steppe. They will no longer do that unless they themselves have holdings that border the steppe. Interface. The declare war window has been restructured. We already knew that, of course. Fix the only X-face checkbox. I will show that in a second. I am so happy about that. If someone is your ally in a war and your enemy at the same time, they now show as your enemy, since walking into them will cause combat. Yeah, that is good. That is definitely clearing things up. Game content. Let's take a look at this. Game over localization will now mention any big empire kingdom that you formed, reformed, or unified through the existing big decisions. I think what the game currently lacks, and this is not a big thing, but it is a thing, what the game currently lacks is not just for game over, but also just for dying, that there is not that much content, that much flavor. They tried it with these symbols, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not that big of a fan of the actual Chronicle that CK2 had. I think the Chronicle was chronically underused by basically everybody because it wasn't that good, but at the same time, some more flavor would be nice. For example, hey, have you taken major decisions, that were very important? Please do mention it. I would be absolutely in love with it. Beating a significant amount of landed Scandinavian adventures now rewards unique nicknames. Very cool. Challenging your ruler for their title now uses the single combat event system. Very cool as well. So far, you just essentially got an event, whether you win, whether you lose. Now you get the full expansion of the flavor pack. Having a trading ceasefire with a former raid target will now occasionally give both parties access to recruitable, notable immigrants. Very, very cool, especially considering that this is something that could have a big effect in the royal court. It seems like a bit of a, preparing the grounds for the royal court, because if you get a notable immigrant from, for example, France, you could get that influence, you could learn the language, you could even, maybe, possibly, have an easier experience if you were to migrate to France. I think that is quite the neat idea, quite the interesting thing. Power Trade now has a runestone memorialization, very cool. Raised voices at the Ting Meet event now has several issues, rather than literally always being the same squabble. Scandinavian Adventurers may now be paid off or given land preemptively rather than always needing to be fought to the end. And let's just take a look at this. The Northern Menace, a horde of disjointed pirates, landless freemen, desperate lesser children, and other assorted miscreants have joined Haraldre in his proposed assault against my holdings. Although the side of the force is formidable, they lack discipline or loyalty, with each scrounged mercenary focused exclusively on what they can get out of the war first and foremost. Unlike a conventional foe, it might be possible to simply deal directly with the invaders. Perhaps a bargain could be struck. Never. Gives me stress because I'm content. You fight the Nords the old-fashioned way. Gives you some prestige. If it's the land they want, why not give it to them? What does happen here? They get Neustria. I spend some prestige, 350, it's not that much. We get a truce for 20 years. We will maybe even form a friendship. We gain the reprieve thing that we talked about earlier. I will lose stress and he becomes my vassal. In my experience, soldiers prefer gold to glory. You can just pay them off, essentially. A gaffol, which I assume is like an old world word for this. 365 is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Stress, because you're content. You win the Northman. Okay, yeah, perfectly fine. We win it, and Harald hates us. Because, he humiliated us, essentially. We'll banish these invaders as we've always done. Oh, this is essentially a declaration, I will destroy you, and this is a declaration of just like, we'll just do it. I don't need to mention it. Now, let's just give him some land here. There you go. The sound is off, of course. Now, he is now the Lord of Neustria. He's my vassal. He's a Satru Norse, which is pretty cool because it keeps him there. I could theoretically say, hey, I would like you to be Denzian, for example. You know, I can become his friend. I can interact with him. That is then a character-to-character interaction, so definitely what it should be. Another thing right here, let's just check this out. You can see the garrison right there. Look at this. You can see the garrison, if I get to the province, you can see it right there. These sieges go faster if there are fewer men in the garrison. Of course, it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's just take a look at this. If I go to religion, boom. Now, usually, when you did this and then clicked on a different faith, it would, yeah, look at this. Now it just works. It just works. It's always checked. Beautiful. Now, there is a thing that I want to talk about that I am very unhappy with. There is a thing that I have seen, I think, since like 7 months. It's like on my list of things I currently hate about CK3. Like, I feel very strongly about this one because it essentially is a major mechanic that works semi-well. What I mean is, please look at the fervor of every religion or of every faith that you see here as I scroll through them. Oh, wait, you can't see my mouse? Oh, I just noticed that you can't see my mouse. I am back. I hope it was fine so far with the with the notes there, but that's okay. Just look at the fervor here, okay? Are you seeing this? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 faiths out of this entire faith list that aren't at 100%. Something clearly isn't working right. This can't be as it is intended. 100% has, yeah, I mean, come on, right? And I really would like that to be fixed. I think fervor in itself is a great mechanic. I think it is significantly better than moral authority, but I also do think that at the end of the day, fervor should be something where I look at it and say to myself, hey, the fervor trends towards 50 maybe. If we go towards 30, then I lose, you know, everything related to, or rather, if we go towards 30, then we get the chance for, you know, outbreaks of heresy. And if we go towards 60, 70, you know, I get bonuses. Maybe we can call crusades, etc., etc. Right now, it's just always so damn high. It's, yeah, so that's all I'm saying. This is one of the major complaints that I very much still have with the game in 1.4 as well. Not a big fan. I hope that gets patched to a certain degree. Now, my mouse is here. My apologies for the mouse not being captured initially. I really like the Scandinavian Adventure essentially paying them off. I think that's a great time, you know, giving them land, etc., etc. I think the changes here generally are good. I think the changes here generally are indeed laying the grounds, you know, preparing the grounds for 1.5. I assume it is called 1.5, the Royal Court, but also is a great addition. I just think that the faith issue is, yeah, it doesn't work as designed. Winter Commanders can now auto-win at competitive skiing. Alright, Dynast can now enforce a divorce or ask a divorce for any member of the dynasty within their realm. Big fan of that. Makes it so that I can actually meddle with my family even further. More roleplay right there. Olympus replaces Sparta as a holy site for Hellenism. Added some extra events around raiders forming a trade relationship with their potential victims. Yeah, the more events, the better. User modding, I'm going to skip over most of those. I just want to mention Get Dummy Male and Get Dummy Female are now deprecated. What does that mean? Nobody knows, but the modders are sad. Get him out of here. Listen, there's some great modding changes here. I want to stress that. Some great modding changes, not relevant for any of us. More power to the modders is always good, but that doesn't mean I need to understand it. Bug fixes. Fixed spiritual head succession not always properly applying, leading to the spiritual head of faith passing on to temporal rulers. In rare cases, that could lead to the player game overing on death as a result of having inherited the head of faith title. I have seen that before. Some other player has told me about it, so it is very excellent that this is now fixed. There are many fixes here, by the way, but I will only mention the most important ones. Bubonic Plague will now only occur after 1346. Okay, very good. Corrected a trigger incongruity that stopped Adventure and Pillage Dynasty legacies being unlocked by valid non-Norse characters, Swedes, Estonians, etc. I was looking at that, actually, in some sort of game. I can't remember. Was it the multiplayer game with Old Main Mordaith and Witchstreamer? I think so. Where you're all of a sudden unable to do that. Now, I'm very happy that they changed that. I'm a big fan, no doubt about it. If an unlanded character is used in a conversion event, they will wear the proper religious clothes. Yep, so far, I converted, I think, to, was it Zaidism? It was some sort of a Muslim religion in the run for the Ivan's second choice achievement, or it wasn't Ivan, it was Vladimir's second choice. And I had somebody in sub-Saharan African priest clothing, so with like tiger skin and whatnot. And just like, yeah, that was weird, so that's fixed, that's good. Landless Scandinavian adventurers now correctly usurp duchies and may raise conquest runestones. Now here, I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but I'm pretty sure that Brittany, 1 generation ago, became independent because my children needed more land, so Brittany, one of them got it. I declared, naturally, after I died, I declared war against my sibling there in Brittany, and what happened was a bit weird. You can see it right here. Princess Hildegard, essentially, oh right, actually she got installed by Faction and I just reconquered it immediately. This got destroyed, but the way of the destruction wasn't natural. It was rather that if we look at the history of this title right here, that a Norseman came in, and I think, because technically speaking, as the Queen of Brittany, she has the event that we saw earlier that essentially says, hey, you are in a position where you can go and accept this guy as your vassal. She accepted him as her vassal, but because this is her only duchy, he took everything. That's, I think, what happened there. So, just to reiterate here, she existed, she was the Queen of Brittany, I was at war with her, and then my war ends and is invalidated, and I ask myself what happened there. And what happened there is that, basically, this guy conquered it, but there was no war. It was instant. Meaning that I assume she got the event for, hey, do you want me to be your vassal? She said yes, and lost everything. Yeah, that there will sometimes be issues, you know, like this. I just want to bring it up because I noticed it. We're trying to join a private server. Passwords are no longer displayed in clear. Very good, I like to see it. Faction behavior has been altered, of course. Maintaining good relations with the key vassals and the integrity of the realm is an intricate diplomatic dance. Our intention is to focus the CK3 experience on the complex life of a medieval ruler full of political dilemmas beyond painting the map. Saying you're not a map painter is very, very common and very appreciated by me, but very common these days, I think, for Paradox games. If you personally, once you play the game a bit, and if you have a strong opinion about the factions and how they behave now, whether they're too strong, whether they're too weak, in my 40 years of playtime in this patch so far, I felt quite good about them. I had regular factions. There was that one bug that I talked about, or rather, you know, the thing where the peasant faction rises up and some of my vassals join and I defeat the peasants and all of a sudden the war's over, which makes no sense, of course. If you like it, if you dislike it, if you find bugs, do let them know on the forums. Then there was, of course, bug fixing, and there is a new multiplayer open beta. We already talked about that. Basically, I also have an overview here. I have all the dev answers so far. None of them are too important, just this one. I think this was a confusion. Although I wonder how paying off Scandinavian Adventures would work. It was essentially the question, right? I tried everything, looked in decisions, but after a Varangian war of 10 years, I got no event whatsoever that allows me to pay them off. Any more information on how to do this? Scandinavian Adventurers are only for the AI. Now, just to clarify this, because I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. Essentially, we as players can only do Varangian Adventures, which goes for one duchy, and you can do it as a landed person. Scandinavian Adventurers are the individual Northmen and Norsemen armies that are running around. Varangian Adventurers cannot be stopped. You have to fight that war. It does not stop. But Scandinavian Adventurers, you can get the event after 30 days of the war having started, okay? So if you get a Scandinavian Adventurer, let 30 days tick, and then you will be asked, hey, what do you want to do? You will get the event that we saw earlier. This is, I think, everything from my side when it comes to the summer. In the coming weeks, we'll continue sharing more details about the Royal Court as it progresses and grows into the graphically rich expansion we are preparing for you. Until then, enjoy an Azure summer or winter if you're in that part of the world. Interesting dev diary, interesting patch notes. It is a great patch, just in conclusion from my side. I personally think it is a really good patch, but you have to be prepared. There will be bugs. I would give you, listen, if you want to play with mods, give it like a week, okay? Give all the modders a week to update their mods, and then we can talk about that. For the moment, I would definitely rather play vanilla if I was you. Some saves might not be compatible. Make sure that you back them up before you play them. And I think that's it. I like this patch. I think it definitely, as I mentioned multiple times beforehand, it prepares the grounds, and that is essentially what I want from this. And it also goes much, much further. Again, more events, more these childhood events, these more single combat events, etc., etc., more trade-bound interactions. I think that is some great stuff. But with that, I will leave you, and I would like to thank the members of the channel, namely the Barons, the Counts, and the Dukes. Thank you all so much. I really do appreciate it. Later, alligator.